Uh, Moving on from that, one of the things we wanted to talk about was we wanted to cover some citizen journalism, some activism news, and for that, what I have in mind is a clip from a friend of mine, a fellow Washington State delegate for Bernie, who has been inspired by everything to start his own show, similar to what's going on here and elsewhere. And one of the things he's doing is trying to meet with local candidates, local personalities, local just people in the area, and talk about the roles that they play and the influence that they have in the community, politically and in the artistic community and beyond. The section that I have in particular is an interview with incumbent Washington State Representative from the 29th Legislative District, David Sawyer. And also in the video is Austin Bierman on the right, and he helped form some of the questions. And the interviewer is David Barnes in the middle. And so I will just get that set up for us here in a moment, and we will take a look. It's called the Progressive Report of Pierce County, and it's with David Barnes. And let me just make sure we're queued up to the right spot here. And sorry about this, something as a result of my computer difficulties. And just to let you know what we have going here is, this was previously queued, I don't know why it lost my marker here. The audio is a little rough due to the situation, but what this is really about is about what we need everybody getting out there doing is things like this, getting engaged in your community, getting in touch with your politicians, and learning things like this. So here we go.
Hard, don't do something you're bored with. Because if you're anything like me, you're not going to do a great job if you're bored at work. But if you actually believe that you're fundamentally changing the world, and you start realizing your potential in a way that, you know, I never want to knock on doors and talk to strangers. I never wanted, like, I'm shy. I play video games all day. Like, that's what I did. But when I realized that, you know, friends I knew were dying, or, we had a war that was unjust, and we were doing all these things, I became motivated to have an impact. And I knew that all the work I was doing, all the doors I was hitting, all the phone calls I was making, every piece and everything I was doing was in some way building something that could help change that. So even on the Obama campaign in some rural area in Iowa, kind of by yourself and just sitting there making calls, the key thing that keeps you motivated is realizing that there are other people making calls, and if you can pull this off, you can have an impact on the planet, and that comes.
And all right, just a moment here and get everything resituated for us here, folks. All right, and so what you saw there, and Nis probably wasn't able to hear that due to some of our technical difficulties. But essentially what you saw there was the Washington State Representative David Sawyer, and what he was saying was basically that if what you do during your day is uninspiring, if you don't feel like you're making a positive difference in the world, you're probably not going to be very good at it. If you don't get that satisfaction from it, that you're doing something that's making a positive difference, it doesn't necessarily have to be what everybody else thinks is a big positive difference. It just has to make you feel that way. So that can be anything from installing cable to cleaning out porta potties to being a Congress or representative to being the president. Like, it can range anywhere in that. It's about what feels like you're doing what is best for you that is also beneficial towards us as a society. And so when we're able to find that, when we have the ability and privilege to find that we are able to accomplish so much more than we thought. He mentions that he was never interested in knocking on doors or talking to strangers. He says normally I was one of those, I was just at home playing video games. I didn't want to talk to strangers and all that stuff. But when he found out that his friends were dying in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, when he found out that people were suffering from poverty just down the street from where he lived, when he started finding these types of things out, he realized that he needed he had to do something, and he wanted to do something, and that motivated him to start talking to strangers, knocking on doors, sitting down for interviews with up and coming progressive journalists, and that's what we need. And what he mentions is that how people stay, one of the ways that people stay motivated, one of them, besides the overall larger change that you're accomplishing, if everybody does what they need to do, it's that there are other people in Washington, there's people in California, there's people in New York, there's people in Florida, there's people in Montana, there's people all across the country trying to do what we just saw David there doing, and what we're doing here, what Benjamin's doing, what other people are doing on other networks, Mike Ferrero on the Humanist Report, for example, and just so many other people are out there trying to get this, to engage in the community and pull the community that's felt excluded from the political process in, so that we're all helping each other and we're all making decisions together as a group as what benefits us together as a society, not what will enrich the people with the best connections and the most power. And so things like the Progressive Report with David Barnes, or like I said, the Humanist Report, or what Benjamin's doing, or what we're doing, or what many other people are out there doing, and what hopefully one of you will be inspired to do eventually, is, I know we have Nick coming up that's going to be doing something, and we need to get as many people engaged in the process as possible. So long as half of us aren't even paying attention, we're never going to have a say in how things work out. And so that was my piece on that. With that, Nis, did you have something you wanted to comment on that?
Yes. If you feel like what Richard said, or around what the incumbent Washington State representative said about it needs to make you happy, and then in that sentence have cleaning out porta potties. If you in that think that, oh my God, no one can feel like they're contributing positively to society, cleaning out porta potties or being a janitor, just if you have ever experienced a garbage strike, especially if that garbage strike was in a city close to a rural area filled with, shall we say, wildlife of the more hungry nature, you will know just how essential roles that you don't even think about, you may even look down your nose at it, there is, depending on how society portrays it, how society values it, there is great value in almost all roles in society, with the exception of Wall Street, of course. Sorry, I had to be just a tiny bit of a DICK. But no, of course, I believe that there's been moments where Wall Street justified part of its existence, but you can find value in almost every function of society. Sewage workers, want to try living in a society where sewers don't work and things come crawling out the toilets. I mean, there's value in many roles that are essential for the rest of us to be able to function that we don't know about. So they may not be glorious, they may not get a spot on primetime TV, but they are essential. So how we portray those is essential. So when you portray moneyed people and powerful people and media people and opinion shows, we portray those as extremely important. And you portray people, even Tea Partiers, when you portray activists as being small children, belligerent, or ineffective, when you talk about teachers as something evil and unions as undermining, or Republicans as being the definition of all that's wrong with the country, or liberals as being the definition of all that's wrong with the country. When you portray people like that, well, there won't be much value in being any of those things. So I would say that teachers, specifically good teachers, but also mediocre teachers, not everyone can be Einstein, not everyone can be Nietzsche. We should treat each other and the function we bring to society with more respect.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And, you know, I could blame it on being a Washingtonian, but I know myself sometimes, I'm fed up with the day or whatever, and sometimes I don't think I treat somebody on the other side of a counter that's providing a service to me with the dignity and humanity that they deserve. And I think everybody has those types of moments, but I think it's important that people recognize it and try to improve that behavior, try to treat other people like human beings. I know sometimes when people are at work, they also feel that way, like the last thing they want to do is engage in any extraneous conversation with you. And so being silent to them is the most courteous thing you can do. So it's important to try to notice that with somebody, to try and get a feel if that person wants to engage or would rather just be left alone so that they can think about whatever it is they're thinking about while they're checking you out or whatever it is they're doing. And so uh, I and I can understand, especially in some jobs where you're not being mentally challenged with circumstances and ways that you have to solve problems that are interesting and stuff like that, that it can become very droll and that it can be miserable. And I don't want to add to anyone's misery at work. And so that's my goal. And so in Washington, I feel like a large portion of people would rather us just tell them what we want, take it and walk away, and that be it. But I know in the South and in other places, they want to, hey, how's your family and all that kind of stuff. And so try to keep that in mind when you're engaging with people. And so if you bump into the mail person or if you see the garbage person outside or whatever, don't sneer at them for accidentally spilling some garbage last time or whatever. They picked up thousands and thousands of loads. And I know in New York City, this blows my mind coming from where the garbage men don't even get out of the trucks. In New York City, apparently they still pick up like garbage bags of garbage that are set on the side of the road. And so sometimes those people don't bag their garbage properly or things like that, and the garbage spills all over the road. The garbage people are generally the ones held responsible for that, even if it was the fault of whoever didn't do it. So keep in mind, a lot of people do a lot of work, and if they're fulfilled with it, that's what's important. And so we need to make sure that we're allowing people to have pride in jobs like those because they do a vital service that we can't live without. And so shout out to all those people with as Mike Rowe would call them, dirty jobs.
And speaking of dirty jobs, politics. We have our recurring lead on when the next votes are coming up.
Yep, and just a quick update for everybody on voter registration and voter deadlines. And so for registration, you still have time to register. If you are in DC, you have till the 16th of this month. The 16th. I think that's South Dakota, I want to say, is the 23rd. And DC also has another deadline on the 23rd, but I just advising everybody get registered by the 16th. New Mexico is on the 10th, so that's already passed, I guess. And then we had New Jersey on the 17th, so within 5 days. And then we had California on the 23rd. So I just wanted to make sure I didn't get these mixed up here. And so as far as voting, we have Oregon and Kentucky coming up on the 17th. But Oregon voters, if you know any or you want to reach out to them by face banking or anything like that, let them know that they can, or they should already know that they can vote now, but that the deadline will be the 17th. And for the Virgin Islands, it's the 4th that they'll be voting, so that'll be June 4th. And Puerto Rico will be voting on June 5th. I don't know if we have any viewers from out there, but if you got any family or friends out there, make sure to let them know that that's coming up and that we want as large of participation as possible. On that note, we can talk with the audience a little bit about some of the things they brought up during the news section. Looks like you might still be muted. Yep, that's the situation. It's a really bad ventriloquist.
Yeah, oh, I was just trolling you. But okay, so we've had some comments, but chat died down a bit. But let's hear. So we have any comments and or questions from chat, or did we just completely blow your mind with our deep insight and philosophy and unableness to speak English? So if you have
a bit frantic as a result of some last minute technical difficulties and so on and so forth. So we're here with you because we want to make sure
my
that we
internet
deliver the best we
connection
can.
completely dying a minute before we went live. No, that wasn't stressful at all.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for subscribing to the Benjamin Dixon channel. And thanks again for, if you're out there tweeting, sharing a link so that other people can watch and find out what this Project Sanity is all about. And if I guess you can also follow us on Twitter at Scandinavia, or you can double check that. And then I'm at Progressive Green. And Nis.
Yeah, search for the Scandinavian Perspective, and you should find me both on Facebook and Twitter. Otherwise, you can hit me up at Nis, N-I-S, at progressivearmy.com, or you can hit up our producer, Kelly, at Kelly, and that is a K-E-L-L-Y, at progressivearmy.com. Moving on to international news, the first hour is almost over, and so is our news segment. But before it's over, we are just going to hit on two big topics that are happening in the international news. So, Turkey, who has been wanting EU membership for quite some time, is in a clash with the EU over several things. So Turkey has been through several application processes to try and become a full-fledged member of the EU. This has been denied several times, primarily due to right-wing parties and their influence in both the EU Parliament and in the local countries. On top of this, to complicate matters, Turkey has, within the recent years under the current president, altered their definition of terrorism. They have widened it to better be able to combat terrorists. They say dissidents. Most people say, among others, they have imprisoned a German reporter for making a satirist joke about the president. Turkey, realizing that they're not getting the full-fledged membership in one go, started negotiation with the EU about Turkish citizens being able to travel within the EU without a visa. This is seen as a stepping stone for membership, getting there one piece at a time. Now, Turkey says that they have met all requirements set forth by the EU to get these, including large payments. But the EU says that they have not, that their definition of terrorism is too wide. Turkey says that they have narrowed it as much as they can, but they can't narrow it further because then they can't combat terrorism like ISIS and militant Kurds. But to complicate matter even further, since the EU started experiencing the migrant crisis, the EU has asked Turkey to help stem the flow of Syrian refugees to the EU by Turkey accepting some large numbers and setting up refugee camps. Now, Turkey has said that they believe that they have filled the requirement of having the ability to travel in the EU without a visa, and that they will not uphold their agreement with the EU to help with the Syrian refugee crisis until the EU accepts this. And the EU says that they can't accept it and that the ball is in Turkey's court, so, in their part of the court for Turkey. So not only are they caught in a civil war and caught between right-wing extremists and I'll do anything to survive politicians, now they're also caught between Turkey and EU right-wing parties and overreaching Turkish president that has undermined decades of very important work within Turkey that until he took power some years ago was a very modern democracy, one of the most secular governments in the world, only rivaled by France, in which having a religious symbol on you at work is actually more or less illegal. So it does not look good for the EU-Turkey relationship, and it most definitely does not look good to it. What should have been a light on the horizon for at least some Syrian refugees has turned into yet another nightmare. But yeah,
I was just gonna say that's terrible. That's unfortunate. That's
yeah, it really is.
when it rains, it pours.
It really is, especially if you've seen pictures of their major cities. The only pictures I've seen that comes even close to that are pictures from Berlin in the final years of the final days of the Third Reich, and even that doesn't compare. It's insane. Yeah. Moving on to even more depressing news in Brazil. The now former president, Dilma Rousseff, the first female president of Brazil, has been removed from office pending an impeachment trial. And Michael Telmer, who is, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who is from the opposition party, has been named president while she is under impeachment. Now, there are quite a few things that you need to bear in mind with this case. First of all, you need to know that after a right-wing coup in 1964, backed by the UK and the US, Brazil managed to get back to elected free elections. And there is a left-wing party, which the short name is PT, which has won 4 national elections in a row. And the latest 2 was won with Dilma Rousseff as the head of the party and candidate for presidency. Now, these last 4 elections, the media networks, which are owned by a handful of right-wing wealthy families, has spent enormous amount of effort trying to tear President Dilma Rousseff down. A quote from Glenn Greenwald's article in The Intercept from today says, instead, as Reporters Without Borders put it earlier this month, in a barely veiled manner, the leading national media have urged the public to help bring down President Dilma Rousseff. The journalists working for these media groups are clearly subject to the influence of private and partisan interest, and these permanent conflicts of interest are clearly very detrimental to the quality of their reporting. What you need to imagine is, what if Fox News was the only news network in America? Or what if all news networks were as political and right-wing as Fox News are? What if the only media you could get the last 8 years was Obama is a tyrant, look at all the terrible things you're doing, he's taking away your freedom? You would have almost no counter-narrative. That's what happened to her. And then the media published polls saying that 60% of the public wants to see her impeached. And that gave the Senate enough cover to vote for her impeachment. Now, oddly enough, the person that they want to take over is Michael Telmer. He has a 2% approval rating. He's banned for the next 8 years from seeking election for public office. And 60% of the public, the same percent that the media there claims wants to see Dilma Rousseff impeached, 60% of the public believes that he should be impeached. And this is before he's even president. He also wants to appoint, as a solution to the hardships of the country, he wants to appoint Goldman Sachs and IMF officials to run the economy. And you can see how well that went in Greece, when the EU did the same. And if you're familiar with the author, John Perkins, he wrote a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman, in which he describes the MO of what not just the US as a state, but also what certain departments in the federal US government does on their own to topple regimes, to destabilize countries or provide opportunity for American businesses. These are the exact MOs that he describes. And not without coincidence, many Brazilians believe the US somehow to be involved in the current political coup. According to Glenn Greenwald, The Economist, which is a paper that dislikes PT and has actively sought Dilma removed from office, has denounced the impeachment and states that those who will replace her, those who are being proposed to replace her in office, her cabinet, will be worse than the current cabinet. And last year, when the impeachment was only discussed, Temer himself said, impeachment is unthinkable. It would create an institutional crisis. There is no judicial or political basis for it. Now, you may wonder why you have not heard this kind of in-depth reporting on what's happening in Brazil. And so are a lot of us. There are many people who are wondering what on earth is going on with the media. Why was Trump in triple-digit hours of coverage, Hillary in double digits, and Bernie Sanders in single digits before 2016? Why are the New York Times, who issued a five-part piece on Libya, which was done over several years, naming several high-level sources and reports, and really going far in depth into the Hillary State Department and what transpired in Libya, inside Libya, from Libyan officials, former Libyan officials, I should say, and it has been completely ignored by the media. It's basically stating that the Iraq War was better for the Middle East than Libya. That Libyan weapons are now everywhere in the Middle East, fueling conflicts, and that a high number of heavy munitions and artillery pieces are in the hands of ISIS, making them a serious threat because of Libya. But
I just want to, while we're on this, I feel inclined to touch. It's hard to believe that it's not intentional when every single time we've engaged in conflicts in the Middle East, that's how it turns out. Save, I guess, maybe the first Gulf War, but then we still did actually leave a bunch of equipment behind, which then was actually taken possession of by the local people. Like,
intentional or not, the press is not covering it.
Yeah.
Even the New York Times is not covering it. They brought it in their paper, but no one else talked about it on the New York Times. No one else talked about it. I mean, the number of investigative journalists that works for-profit media, for corporate news, can be counted on a couple of hands. And when they finally bring forth in-depth reporting, it's ignored. So what's happening? Why has Brazil not covered, the news not covered Brazil in any meaningful way? And if you don't believe me, go to The Intercept and check out Glenn Greenwald's article on the situation in Brazil. It's called Brazil's Democracy to Suffer Grievous Blow as Unelected Corrupt Neoliberal is Installed. Glenn Greenwald is not known for pulling his punches and has grown increasingly opinionated, but he is still an incredible researcher. If you compare that with CNN's article, Dilma Rousseff, I'm the Victim of Great Injustice article, CNN has no background. They just accept the impeachment as fact. They accept the premise of the impeachment as fact, I meant to say. And just yeah, they don't delve into any history. They don't delve into any motivation. They don't delve into any financial ties or anything. So it's too expensive. It's much easier just to tell a good story about what's on the surface. There's no money in delving beneath the surface. And besides, you don't want to piss off anyone at the U.S. State Department in case that they are involved in this, do you? I mean, that could lose your corporate media access. And we won't have that. We can't in any way risk that the politicians are angry with us. Now, can we? That would be just terrible. So...
And I think the dynamic that you described does a good job of squelching upstarts or people who would want to do those types of things, and then getting shut down, being like, well, if you write that, if you write that story, then we're not going to be able to go to this thing. Nobody from our network's going to be able to get invited to this thing later. So if you do that, everybody you work with is going to hate you. So I mean, you're free to do it, but like, and not to mention also, it's not just that investigative journalism doesn't make a whole lot of money. It doesn't drive a lot of views in the ways that it's usually done. It also costs a lot of money. It's expensive and it takes a lot of time. And it's a lot easier to screenshot a Donald Trump tweet and talk about that for 2 minutes than it is to go in depth about how many schools there are with children that only get their meals from school. That's the only place they can reliably find a place to eat. That takes a little bit more time, a little bit more effort, and risks upsetting whichever jurisdiction or state or representative happens to be politically connected in that particular area that you're highlighting. And so
Yeah.
it's the self-perpetuating mechanisms in it that also help make it so that it's so consistent and so strong in shutting down what we used to think of as what this was all about, journalism being.
Yeah, and as Fritz Karl in chat is remarking, if they reported about financial ties, they would actually expose themselves.
That is also an inconvenience. Friends, family members, other associates. And like you said before, you follow the money and you know what you're going to find. Like, that's why
Yeah,
much
I mean, my fiance and I, we have recently started rewatching The Wire season 1, and we've gotten to the part where they are starting to follow the money. They're rolling into all sorts of trouble. And they're pontificating on, you follow the drugs, you find drug dealers and drug addicts. If you follow the money, oh, no, never follow the money. You never know where it's going to lead you. I mean, there might be politicians.
Yeah, exactly. So you follow the sensationalism, you'll find more sensationalism, but you follow the money and you'll figure out what that sensationalism is hiding.
Yeah.